Welcome to the Athlete Brand Advisor Podcast, featuring advice and interviews about athlete branding. Learn how marketing, public relations, and broadcasting can grow your brand. We also have special episodes to talk about recent news, events, and anything in the world of sports. The podcast is sponsored by Pliable, a versatile marketing, PR, and broadcasting company that identifies opportunities and creates tailored content for its clients. Now it's time to roll. Here's your host, Glynn.
Thanks, and welcome to the Athlete Brand Advisor Podcast. In this episode, we're talking about what it takes to play college sports. But we're not talking about what it takes on the field or on the court or on the ice. We're talking about what it takes to get in front of college coaches and how you're going to get recruited. So joining us today is Francais Olexa, and Francais Olexa happens to help everybody get recruited to play college sports. She's been a superstar on Instagram. She's all over my account with her videos, and she's full of information. So we're going to bring her on the podcast here today. She is a former NCAA Division II softball coach dedicated to transforming the recruiting process for families. After playing at Glynn University and competing internationally in Germany, she joined the St. Leo Lions as an assistant coach. In her career, she realized how important it was for athletes to have a coach who could break down the details and create a clear path to success. So now, with 4 years of college coaching experience, she focuses on helping families navigate the recruiting journey, expert advice, actionable strategies, personalized support, and she's here to help us today. So welcome in, Coach Olexa.
Thank you for having me today.
Yeah, this is great. And like I said, if anyone hasn't followed you yet on Instagram and social media, on TikTok, you can find her at Olexa on Deck and really enjoy your videos. So let's chat here. First thing, talk to me about your days as a coach and then how you got into the recruiting education space.
Yeah, so I actually started coaching when I was in high school. I just loved being able to pass along information, and I think that kind of stemmed from growing up around people around me who wanted to pass along information, like being a part of associations and academies where they were bringing in higher level athletes like Division I, or even athletes at the international level who were giving back to the game. And that kind of just became part of life. I just thought, if we're learning all these things, then the younger players deserve to know what we're learning so that they can kind of stand on the shoulders of giants and make the game even better. So I actually started coaching in high school, and then towards the end of my college career, I looked at my coach and I was like, hey, I'm not ready to be done yet. So that's how I ended up in Germany. And I was very blessed to play for a program that also wanted me to help coach the women's team and the youth team. So I got a lot of experience in that realm and a lot of experience with the language barrier as well. So you become very, very patient. Yep. But then after that, I had kind of started talking to the coach I played for, and I said, hey, if you hear of any opportunities, please let me know. I want to get into college coaching. I want to know what that looks like. So she had actually reached out to me, I think a week before my 22nd birthday, and she goes, hey, St. Leo's looking for a pitching coach. Should I tell them that you're interested? And I responded back, over the moon. Like, please, yes, pass along anything that I need to do to get that position. And all of the stars aligned. And it was actually funny because when I was on the flight to Germany, I started thinking, if I can coach at any program, where would I want to go? And St. Leo was always the top of the list. They were a hard program to play against, but they were always fun to play against because they just did the little things right. And so I was very excited to be a part of that program. And then they let me be a part of everything. Like, I wasn't just the pitching coach. I was going to recruiting tournaments. I was helping out with fielding practice too. So I got to see what each side of the field looked like as a very young coach. But being able to put that all together and then go to these recruiting tournaments and be like, okay, now what stands out to me here? And I was very excited that after my first recruiting tournament, Coach Kimberger looked at me and she goes, "You've got good taste." So I was like, okay, we're on the right track here. But it just really became clear to me after doing lessons and whatnot, after being done with college coaching, that so many families are misled in this process. They're being told that they have to spend thousands of dollars on top of what they're already spending per season. And then in the hopes that they get a scholarship that pays off what they've already put into the process. And sitting down with my dad and my sister, and my dad still coaches a travel ball team at home in Canada. So talking to him about what his players are currently going through, it just hit me, why isn't anybody offering this inside information, and why are we misleading these families? So then, after about a 12-hour drive with my sister to go watch my dad play at Canadian Nationals, we were like, why not us?
Yeah, there you go. That's awesome.
Yes.
I love that. And so then, as you obviously take a lot of different things you learned through coaching, and, obviously I work with a lot of athletes who, similar to what you said, I'm not done and they want to coach. That must have been a cool experience for you, because now you're able to still contribute to coach, right? Just in a different way, to help a lot more athletes rather than just one team.
Yes. Yeah. And the feedback that I get on social media from parents and athletes saying, I stumbled across your account. I've been feeling so lost. These tips make me feel so much better, and I understand a little bit better now. That fuels my passion for this, because it's so reassuring to know that, even if I get to help one kid through this process, that I've relayed my information that I've learned along the way. And ultimately, like I said before, that's just kind of been ingrained in my approach from a very young age, that we're supposed to give back from what we learn. So being able to help people on a wider scale definitely feels, at times a little scary, because you're like, oh my gosh, there's so many kids that need help. But at the same token, it's so empowering to be able to see these kids make it to the next step. And a couple of girls locally that I was working with made it to junior colleges and Division IIIs. And, it might not be the Division I that they dreamed of going to their whole life, but it's a really good fit for them. Like, they're happy there. They're getting their education in what they wanted to study, and being able to have softball as a part of the bonus of the program is what makes me very proud to be able to work with them.
Well, and I like also, too, what you've talked about before in some of your videos, that it's about you, the athlete, not necessarily about the school, or like so many kids get hung up on D1 versus actually, if you're not going to play pro sports, there is a huge other component to this, which is your education,
Yes.
and actually going to a school that fosters your career path and what you want to do after sports, because that's the most important time of your life. And it's important to make decisions about your college decision based on the future of your life, not just maybe a hope that you could play professionally.
Right. And that was actually something that fueled the creation of Olexa on Deck as well. So I actually applied for my green card to stay here in the United States. And after I got my work approval, I started applying for jobs. And it hit me, I'm going through the recruiting process all over again. Just applying for these jobs, that's all it is. I've already done this a couple of times. Yeah. So being able to create that connection for families as well. And that's exactly what we go over in the program that we offer, where it's a little bit more hands-on, a little bit more one-on-one with these families, where we have two separate programs that break down. The first one is how to narrow down the schools to your top 15. Are you actually looking to go to a Division I, or are you trying to stay within a 3-hour drive from your house? Because there might not be a Division I within those 3 hours, and that might be the deal breaker for you. I packed up and moved my bags across the continent at 17. So, that's not for everybody.
Yeah.
But being able to understand what you want in the process is so important, because the kids and the families definitely do get hung up like, it's the level that I get to that determines my success. And that's not true at all. Is this school a good fit for you?
Yep.
Are you enjoying your experience?
Yep. No, that makes absolute sense. Let's break this down, because I feel like there's some questions I have burning for you. One is going to be around these recruiting websites. As you said, I hear it all the time. Travel softball, you're paying for the hotels, you're doing all these things, you're paying for that one-on-one coaching, you're paying already a tremendous amount. And then you're told you've got to maybe have this recruiting page on a website that's going to help you get in front of coaches. Is that really necessary?
I mean, I'm a little bit biased, from my experience, but also talking to the coaches who are around me and in my social circle and things like that. The recruiting pages became really frustrating to navigate because they weren't being updated as frequently as we would need them to be. So these athletes are spending thousands of dollars to have somebody customize a website for them, which I think in theory is a really great approach. But the reality of a coach sitting down and searching 2026 pitcher outfielder on that website to come across your page is really minimal, because chances are they don't have the time to be sitting down and doing that. They're really relying on those emails that you're sending, because you're showing the intent, you're showing that you're interested, you're keeping them updated with how you're doing, and then they click on that website and, you might have a 450 batting average now, but that website only reflects a 275 because it's 6 months out of date. So as a college coach, I got really frustrated with those websites because they weren't being updated. And now, which stats am I going off of? Am I going off of the one that the kid's actually emailing me, or do I go off on the website?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And then let's talk about some of the things that maybe you want to share with some of these athletes and their parents about positive tips, what they should be doing, right? So that they can have some good information and a sample of kind of your work and what you do and why you recommend certain things.
Yeah, so I would say definitely start when you're interested. So I actually got a comment on a TikTok video a couple weeks ago asking if 7th and 8th graders should be sending out recruiting emails. And no, they should not. They get deleted right away. Like, you can't even be recruited. You might not even like the sport in a couple of years.
Right, yeah, there's a lot of variables there.
Yes. So definitely make sure that you're sitting down and having those conversations with the kid. I was adamant growing up that I didn't want to go far from home. And then once I started sending out emails, we kind of found the Sunshine State Conference and started reaching out to schools within the conference. And my dad sat me down and he goes, "Listen, kid, you can drive 8 hours to Portland, Oregon, or you can fly 8 hours to Florida. Where would you rather be?" And for me, my sister also looked at me and said, "Can you go somewhere where I can vacation?" So I think I fulfilled my end of the deal, but that part of that is having the conversation. I didn't want to go far from home because my sister didn't go far from home, but it wasn't necessarily what I wanted in the process. I was just going off of what she did. So once we kind of sat down and actually had those conversations, like, hey, what academic program are you interested in pursuing? What type of school do you need? Do you want a big school? Do you need a small school? Do you want to have that personal interaction with the teachers? Because at the larger schools, you're not going to be getting that. So understanding that they need to be doing the homework outside of the sport, if that makes sense, like the homework in recruiting. So that's always our first and foremost, is understanding what you want in the process. And then on top of that,
just to interject there, how much do you place on trying to figure out, when they are a senior in high school, what they want to do in life, because it can obviously change. It changes in college in some cases. How much, or do you ask that question as a parent? Should you be asking, hey, do you want to get into business? Hey, do you want to be a fashion designer? Hey, do you want to be a, veterinary dentist? Like, what are the things, or how important should that be in this process, which may even be unknown?
I mean, realistically, anybody at any age, you can ask them what they want to do for the rest of their life, and chances are they'll say, I'm still figuring it out.
That's true.
So I don't put as much emphasis on, what do you want to do for the rest of your life, but rather the emphasis on what are you passionate about. So I'm very passionate about health and holistic nutrition and, having a better approach to things. So I've been blessed where I've been able to be put into a position where I get to combine all of those things along with what I've learned along the way. I actually went and got my undergrad in biology because I had dreams of going to PA school. PAs don't exist in Canada. They've only just started to kind of become part of the medical system. So I found out very quickly I wasn't going to get an internship. And then I was like, okay, switching gears, what can I do now? So I actually got my master's in social media marketing because I found the marketing and advertising aspect of things very interesting. I wanted to know what it was like to build websites and to, the psychology of catching people's attention. Like that part of it really intrigued me. So now I've been able to blend all of these things into something where I get to help people on a greater level. So it's not so much, what do you want to do for the rest of your life, but hey, what are you passionate about? Are you passionate about helping animals? Then maybe we can look at getting you into a program that has some electives within that realm, not necessarily choosing that as your major right off the hop. I always recommend, if you're completely unsure, looking at really general majors like business management or communications, because that can help you in every aspect of life. But again, signing up for something that you don't care about makes 4 years of education incredibly boring.
Yeah.
So, follow what you're passionate about, so that you can kind of actually guide the conversation a little bit better. And then, if that changes, it changes.
Yep. No, that makes sense. What about the financial conversation for a parent, and how to approach that with your athlete when they want to play D1 or they may not get a full ride? And I imagine that almost needs to come as part of this process.
Yes. Yeah. So actually, in part of our program, we do break down finances. We talk about what the cost of tuition is versus the cost of going to a school, because they're not the same thing. They're not all put into the same bucket. We talk about the difference between cost of a public school versus a private school. I went to 2 private schools. The cost is significantly higher, but I feel like the resources that I wanted out of a college or university were provided at the private school level. I enjoyed being in smaller classes. I didn't want to be in a class of 300 plus kids. So understanding what the cost entails and what you're willing to put into it beforehand versus what you can put into it in the process. Because that's something that I think a lot of parents overlook, is they're like, okay, well, we're spending $20,000 plus per year just while my kid's in high school, but they'll get a full ride and then I won't have to pay anything when they're in college. But it's like, hey, you're looking at that Division I, they're probably not walking away with a full ride.
Right.
So I know specifically for softball, I do talk to a lot of athletes about looking into junior college programs, because when I was going through the recruiting process, junior colleges were exclusively for kids who weren't good enough or didn't have good enough grades. And it's completely taken a shift now. These junior colleges offer really great starting points for these athletes who maybe don't know what they want to major in, but they have very strong athletic abilities. Now you're walking away with 2 years of playing time, and you might be getting a discount on tuition once you get to the next step. So, there's all of these benefits to it where it doesn't have that same cost that's typically associated with the kind of upper level schools.
Yep, that makes sense. Let's do a little rapid fire here on some questions that I have about recruiting. For example, in your mind, a typical recruitment video that you might send to a college coach, How long do you think these coaches are honestly looking at these videos for?
As I learned in our earlier conversation, it depends on the sport, but I know people around my personal circle and for me personally as well, I didn't want to be sitting down watching a video longer than 5 minutes. I found that if it was getting towards that 3 minute mark, I'm skipping through parts of the video. If they're saying that they're a pitcher outfielder that slaps, and we get through part of the video and you're like, it's not really kind of standing out. You end up skipping through to the next part. So they might be missing out on some of those aspects of your game that you take a lot of pride in because the video is getting too long. Because these coaches, they don't have time to sit down and watch 10-minute videos for every athlete. It's going to be the athletes that stand out that they'll sit down and watch those longer videos for.
All right. How about an intro email that you're going to send to a coach? How many paragraphs or how many paragraphs should it be?
I would say probably 3 at most. That first paragraph, you definitely have to introduce yourself. This needs to be something that makes you stand out, whether or not that's your statistics, whether or not that's your GPA, or what you want to major in because the school offers that major. Make sure that you're doing that homework first. But yeah, that first paragraph definitely needs to be focused around why you're reaching out. Why does this school matter to you? And then you can go into kind of the smaller details about individual statistics and things like that. I always recommend that the players personalize it in some way. So if you're the backup catcher and you've played behind a catcher who's going to Division I and you finally get to be on varsity this year type of thing, what'd you learn about working behind her? Like, what are you learning from that Division I recruit that you're implementing into your game? And it doesn't need to be something that is lengthy. It can literally be one sentence of, I saw the way she commanded the field and I want to make sure that I implement that in my game moving forward. So then in that third paragraph, that's where you can say, here's my upcoming tournament schedule. Here's the camps that I'm going to. I'm interested in going to your camp. But we always, always recommend having that link to that highlight video after the first paragraph. Because if you're making a coach scroll through your email, they just don't have time. The amount of emails that they get every day, you have to make yourself stand out.
How about a subject line? What are your thoughts on subject lines? I know I've heard some of it, but give me a little bit more on what you think.
I always feel like at least a last name should be included in the email. I've had some people kind of push back and be like, well, it's redundant, you're emailing them. But there's some kids who their parents aren't okay with them having personal emails yet, and that's totally fine. We need to make sure that they understand that. So always having your name, at least your last name in that subject line, your position, grad year, GPA are incredibly important. You don't want it to be a whole novel in itself where you're putting your high school team and your travel ball team and all these other things in there. Like, it needs to be, how are they going to find you? They're going to search you by your grad year. They're going to search you by your position, potentially by GPA. And then, like I said, that name in the email also helps that subject line stand out.
Yeah, well, so many kids have crazy email addresses, right? Who knows what they were calling themselves or what nickname it was, and you never know. And so I think that you're right. I mean, obviously, putting the name in there so they have at least a basis of what to remember about this email or to open it. To try to get it through. So I think that's important. What are some things you would stay away from in a actually, hold on. Let me get back to the emailing. One more question. How many emails should you send to follow up with a coach that you haven't heard back from at all yet? 3, 4, what are we looking at before we're like, eh?
Yeah, so actually when I started coaching, I was adamant that I was going to respond to every kid who emailed me that I could respond to. And that very quickly went out the window because I had an hour in the office prior to practice, and that included planning pitching practice and what we were going to do that day. So very quickly, it hit me that I wasn't I didn't have the time. And quite frankly, like once we stepped away from the field, I would set some time aside to go through emails, but also at the same token, I was an assistant coach and I was getting at least 10 emails a day. So, you go 5 days without opening a recruiting email, and now you have 50 and you're like, okay, I'm overwhelmed. So in terms of follow-up emails, making sure that you are following up when there's something significant to report. So, don't report.
Not a week later, hey, did you get my email?
Yes. Yeah. Or, what are your thoughts about my highlight video? Like there were some kids that would ask for feedback on your highlight video. And it's like, oh, well, I don't know what you're working on. Like what's your focus in the first place? So, my rule of thumb, follow up when there's something significant to report. Are your stats improving after working hard on improving your swing for the last 3 months? Do you have an upcoming tournament that's near me or that that I'll be recruiting at? Things along those lines. Are you going to a camp that's near me that's open for multiple coaches, not just, you're not going to one other school's camp. But yeah, the kids that would email and be like, yeah, my sister got an A on her math test today and I've been studying with her and I'm so proud of her. It's like, oh, kid, like you're getting your name recognized for the wrong reasons because now you're just filling up our inbox without anything relevant to your recruiting process.
Right. Yeah, no, that makes sense. Cool. Well, these are all super helpful tips. And if you want more of these, you can find absolutely tons more. Like I said, Olexa on deck on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. How else can people get in touch with you so they can find out about your services?
They can email us directly at alexaondeck@gmail.com. We also have a school platform. If they just search Olexa on Deck through school, and school is spelled SKOOL, they'll be able to find our whole program. So like I mentioned before, we have kind of a community on there where we have all of our programs to help educate these families and help them understand the recruiting process, along with free information like ebooks and checklists before you go through to your recruiting tournaments and fun things like that.
Oh, that's great. Well, you're doing great work. Keep up all the good work. And thank you again for joining us here on the podcast today. It's really been a pleasure, Francis.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to the next one.
All right. I'm Greg Glynn. Glad you could tune in and stay pliable, my friends.
Thanks for listening to the Athlete Brand Advisor Podcast. Be sure to check out the show notes from today's episode and catch up on recent episodes at pliablemarketing.com. We also encourage you to share topics and guest ideas by emailing our production staff at pliablemarketing@gmail.com. We love hearing from our loyal listeners and athletes who want to grow their brand. So jump in and be part of the podcast because that's how we roll.